Just a brief introduction to get us started. Our first presenter tonight is Emily Saunders, and she is an online Russian instructor at Global Personalized Academics, and she's going to give us some information about how she uses online materials in her classes, and then we will follow up with the Q&A. So Emily, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. All right, let me get to my slides. And here we go. All right, so my name is Emily Saunders, and I have been working as an online Russian teacher since 2011. I work for, I'm a private contractor, and right now I'm working for Global Personalized Academics, so I hope I got that right, GPA. They were once blendedschools.net, if anyone knows that, and I'm also affiliated with, I hope I got this right, AIU8. There's been some name changes around in my organization. I teach predominantly 9th through 12th graders, occasionally college students. Right now I have students in Pennsylvania, Florida, and Illinois. And I live in Olympia, Washington, which makes teaching their first period classes quite interesting. And so since I work with high schoolers are somewhat language novices for the most part, and they're kind of focused on getting the right answer. And they very quickly discover Google Translate. And I'm sure most of you have run into this. And this is, I've sort of done the standard slap hand, you know, don't do that, use it right. And I've come to the conclusion that I'm not sure that my students actually know how to use it or how to look up words. And so I've been working on this, trying to dedicate at least one entire lesson to Google Translate each year, and then coming back to that lesson throughout the semester, so that we're really thinking about how we acquire new vocabulary. There's the vocabulary that's in the lesson, and then there's the vocabulary that students want to include in their writing. And how can we do that without some of the things that, as you know, crop up? And I'll give some examples. And so I just want to ask kind of a quick question to begin with. I don't have my chat box open. I'm wondering if we can do a raise hand and I can see it. Let me just see. Whoops, that's not what I wanted to do. Come on, annotation. And I'm sort of curious which you guys use. If there's annotation skills, my phone. All right, sorry about that. Background noise. So which ones do we expect, which ones do you use? Which ones do we expect are, there we go. Okay, now I can get my chat box up. So there are some annotation skills. I'm kind of curious if anyone can make a mark. Are you paper dictionary people? Are you Google Translate people? I personally do use Google Translate. Do you forbid that in your students? Or do you allow it? And then how do you allow it? Those are kind of the questions that I have. And if you can excuse me for just a moment. I apologize. I have a child at home who just took a call from someone doing political robocalling. All right, so the usual issues with Google Translate. We know it makes mistakes, and sometimes it makes mistakes quite humorously. So we have, for instance, this is an actual mistake of a student of mine who said, my family has 3 cars, and plugged that sentence whole hog into Google Translate, and Google Translate spat out, моя семья состоит из 3 автомобилей, which means that my family consists of 3 cars. And I had a picture in my head of papa car, mama car, and baby car. And usually when you say my family has, you actually are going to be saying a sentence that says my family consists of 3 people. In this case, Google Translate got it wrong. And then what I like to call the являться problem. So someone will type in something like, I am a good student, or he is a chef, and it comes up with a much more complicated way to say that than rather he is a chef. And so if you speak Russian, you'll know that является is a much more complicated word. Now, if you have intermediate and advanced students, that's not an issue. I work primarily with novices, and that's an immediate red flag that this student used Google Translate, because we're not going to cover that, not even in 3rd year, I think. So this did not come from them. They know this from someplace else. So how do we make this fun? What can we do? So one of the things that I like to do to sort of show how Google Translate gets things wrong is to introduce students to this one particular YouTube channel run by a splendid gal named Melinda Kathleen Reese. And what she does is she puts popular songs in through numerous layers of Google Translate and then put them back into English. And they sing what Google Translate pipes out with humorous results. And I would do this to kind of instill in students not like don't use Google Translate, but a healthy distrust of what they get in Google Translate. I want them always to be thinking, is this right? And then also these videos are really, really funny. I don't know if anyone has actually watched any of these. But they're kind of fun. So if we, for instance, take Miley Cyrus's Wrecking Ball, it takes wrecking, wreck, sink, and ends up with I like the ball in the sink. And the video looks very similar to the original. It's just done differently with humorous results. One of my favorites is from Disney's Mulan, I'll Make a Man Out of You. And you can see what happened to Saddest Bunch, became a depressed banana. She turned Taylor Swift's Blank Space in through Google Translate and ended up with A Nightmare Dressed Like a Daydream, turning into a screensaver. So what I would do with students, there's a really great video that she has about how Google Translate works, and it's under Thoughts on Translation. I would have students vote and maybe watch one of these and perhaps discuss their favorite mistranslation, like I just showed you examples of. It could be fun with students, particularly with high schoolers, to decide on a song and then put that through several layers of Google Translate and share what you get out the other side. I have a Padlet in which I have my students share them. And then hopefully get these novice language learners to realize that one-for-one word correlation just doesn't happen. I mean, it's a fairly basic thing, but most of my students come into classes without any idea that it's not just to plug the Russian word in for the English. They're sort of looking for syntax to be exactly the same, and they get surprised when it's not. And so for students to use Google Translate well, they need to know how to identify parts of speech. So we run into problems with work being a noun and a verb, even possibly an adjective if you want to talk about a workspace, although I think technically that's not. Differences between literal and literary translations. A useful resource for me is Disney songs that have been dubbed in English, because they have to go for a literary translation of songs. There's enough of them posted out there that have the literary singable version of the Disney song in the target language that's also then been translated into literal English of what the target language is saying. So for instance, the Russian for let it go is let go and forget. And then I also like to suggest that students use Google Images as their dictionary to make sure that the word that they're looking up is the one that they want. Sorry, is my audio not working so well?
Your audio is okay, but it is going in and out in terms of level a little bit,
Okay.
but it's still fine. Go ahead.
Okay. So to get students acquainted with English and the parts of speech, I would give them an assignment like this, so in pair work, where they would need to figure out in each of these situations with the word fair or the word club or the word stand or the word part, what part of speech is that? To understand that a fair fight is not the same as fair weather, even though they're both adjectives, neither is that the same as a county fair. And by the way, if you put county fair into Google Translate, you get actually the word noun county and the word fair in Russian. So two nouns back to back, it doesn't work. I was trying that the other day. And then taking them into Google Translate to walk through. And the main reason why I want them to know is because when I ask them to write about themselves or their family or what they do or what their favorite hobbies are, they're going to need to look up words that are outside of the index in the back of the textbook. And so I want to give them the tools to be able to do this. And if I want them to look up, say, for instance, the word county fair, and I like to do just in class, like a did Google Translate get it right? Did Google Translate get it right? And hopefully they can look and see this word fair and then see the word spravedliva. And even if you don't speak Russian, you could perhaps recognize the same shapes of the letters down here and realize that a county fair is not an adjective. So this is not the word you would want. And then there's these lovely sort of lists down below. So I have a problem with students looking at the first word and thinking that's what they got. Then we've got 3 nouns. So then how do you know which noun to use of those 3? Well, you can make a guess based on the English over here. Or I'd work them through Google Images. So here's one of those nouns. Here's another one of those nouns. And here's the third. And if you don't speak Russian, you could even still perhaps take a guess at what might be the closest to a county fair. I mean, this one has the vegetables and the fruits on display, but this one has a bit more of a festive air. And I don't know if I would choose this one, but I think this is perhaps the closest Russian really to what the American county fair is. They're not exactly the same thing. And I hopefully get students to work through some rules, ultimately ending up with a bit that you can add into your rubric of making sure that students feel empowered to use it, not like their hands are being slapped and not like they're being sneaky and cheaty if they go in and look up something in Google Translate. So I'd ask that they sort of do an upside down duck. Keep it simple, where possible, stick with what we've been, the language that we're practicing right now. When introducing something new, make sure that you've got the right part of speech for it. So if you've used the word work, that's a new word for you. Make sure that how you're using it is a noun or a verb or exactly kind of how you want to. And then for those things that there's possible differences, if there's lots of different nouns, use Google Images to see which noun you want to use. I once had a student enter in a writing assignment. I was asking about favorite foods, and he said that he really liked to eat Skittles, and he did everything right except that he didn't use Google Images. And so if you want to practice on your own, you can put Skittles, just the word Skittles, into the chat box. And I think even I eat Skittles. I'm not sure if that will do it. But it comes up with bowling pins, so it's a lot of fun. And then the most important thing is I would ask students to reread their work and say, do I understand? And if they can't understand what they wrote, then they did not write it. And the kind of hanging question that I have for myself is how exactly to word this on a rubric. Proper use of Google Translate is kind of a generic term. I'd like students to take some risks and play with language, but I kind of want them also to be using their own words, not words that Google Translate gave them into like a solid paragraph or a sentence. And so I'm still playing around with the wording of that, and I love suggestions. But the main thing that I want to instill in them is that these are the tools that you can use them well, and just make sure that you can understand what you wrote. And so that's how I would like to leave this. Thank you very much for giving me this time to share. It's been an honor.
Okay.
Thank you, Emily.
Stephen, just to clarify, do we want to do Q&A individually after each presentation or a group Q&A after all 3 have presented?
I think a group Q&A after all 3 presentations. So let's move on to Lillyrose. Okay.
So our next presenter will be Lillyrose Veneziano Broccia, beautiful name. And she is a lecturer in foreign languages and co-director of the Italian language program at the University of Pennsylvania. And she is going to give us some of her insight. So Lillyrose, there you are. I can see
Hello.
you. And I can hear you. Very good. So you may go ahead.
Okay. Buonasera. Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I just need one moment. Can you see my PowerPoint?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So thank you very much for your presentation and for having me here again this evening. I titled my very, very short intervention, Adaptation, Teaching and Learning Beginning Language and Culture Online. And I'll get more into why I use that title, but I wanted to also introduce myself. I am Lillyrose Veneziano Broccia from Philadelphia, and I'm at the University of Pennsylvania. I've been teaching here full-time since 2007. And I started teaching online in 2013. The reason that I got really excited about teaching online is because one of my colleagues here in the German department, Ed Dixon, started teaching online and works at the Penn Language Center and had done a wonderful job putting together a symposium with presentations from all over the world about online teaching. And it's still quite a baby, but it was quite the newborn at the time. And what really pulled me into wanting to teach online were his words that stayed with me and still do. Teaching online made him a better teacher in general, made him a better teacher in the classroom, face-to-face, blended, online, etc. And I buy into anything that's going to make me a better teacher and create a better learning environment for my students. So that's what pulled me into it. And that's a question I would like to pose to all of you to keep in mind. Why did you turn to online teaching? And what inspires you to stay? So this semester, this term, these are some of the topics that you all have been discussing: the scope of information, array, variety of viewpoints, the leveraging of technology, textbook language, language variety, topicality, and current relevance, addressing multiple modes, balancing language skills, and differentiating instruction. What really struck me about this amazing array of topics is that the word adapting is used every single time to introduce the ideas, adapting materials, adapting content, etc., which I think is perfect for us as teachers. We have to adapt, and we want to adapt, and that's why we do what we do. We're helping our students adapt to a new language, to a new culture. We're adapting to new generations every year, every semester. We're adapting to new technologies that are moving so quickly. And I think all of these topics are touched on so beautifully in the different modules that you covered. My personal online teaching and learning experiences have included these here: Italian Survival Kit, which is a half-credit course online, Beginning Italian 1 and 2, which are each 1 credit and part of our language requirement. So they are meant to take the place of the face-to-face classroom course. Sicilian Language and Culture, which is a half-credit course and an elective. Advanced Italian 2, which I offered as a blended course as an experiment. And Beginning Italian as a community service course at an organization here in West Philadelphia, which I offered as a blended course for no credit. One of the major things that came of putting Italian online in the first place was the fact that it is teamwork. And if this particular evening and this event and your organization doesn't prove this, I don't know what does. It took a huge community of people to put together even one online course. And I'm thrilled to be on both sides of it, still learning and helping others learn how to do this better. And these are some of the people that I thank very much for helping me to put the courses that I've been teaching online. And the students, of course, are a huge part of that equation as well. Some of the approaches and frameworks that I use in my online teaching are the same that I use in my face-to-face teaching, which are the World Readiness Standards 5 Cs plus the 6 C of creativity. And I do wish that it would be part of the 5 Cs, but I always keep it in mind, and it really, really allows us to adapt beautifully when we keep in mind our students' talents and their genuine interests, and we bring them into the classroom, whether that be an online classroom or a brick and mortar classroom. Communication is absolutely fundamental. It's the goal, and communication in all 3 modes of communication: interpersonal, interpretive, and presentational. And I hope to be able to show you some examples of that. So the key is integrating the 5 Cs plus the 6th C of creativity, which is the C around the 5 Cs. The C meaning SEA, the waters around all of these 5 Cs, and the modes perfectly integrated together, at least partially within each lesson and each meeting. The idea of differentiated instruction has become fundamentally important to me, and it's made teaching, which was already rewarding, just wonderful. Every single semester, of course, the goals are set out, the objectives are set out, but with new students and with the world changing around us, differentiated instruction allows us to really bring in what our students are interested in, what's going on in the world around us, while meeting our objectives and staying on course, but remaining flexible and adapting to them and to our surroundings. The idea of backward design, again, having objectives set out for students, communicative objectives, different kinds of content depending on the level, depending on the courses. Formative assessment has become fundamentally important so that students, in the presentation we just heard, which was wonderful and put such a nice concrete face on the things that we try to teach our students. So instead of just having this hazy, well, Google Translate doesn't work because of these very difficult nuances of language, it makes it so concrete, at least for the moment. And I think that's wonderful. And you were saying that you want students to take risks, to go out and have fun with the language, and formative assessment is such a great way to do that. So they absolutely don't get penalized for trying, and it's a place for us to know that what we're doing is coming across, they're understanding, they're moving forward, but the students will want to take risks and have fun and be creative with the language and have fun with it. And of course, summative assessments, because I think most of us have to give a grade. We were talking about rubrics earlier as well. The summative assessments are a necessary evil, I might say. I do feel a lot of freedom in the formative assessments that I don't feel in the summative assessments, but we also need to keep in mind that students do receive grades and are concretely assessed for what they do. The asynchronous and synchronous work in the class reflect each other. So what they do asynchronously prepares them for what they do synchronously, and vice versa. This is just an example of what a weekly work program looks like for students. We have the communicative goals as the very first thing that they focus on, and then the different kinds of assessment reflect those communicative goals in class and out of class. This is what their worksheet looks like. So they know what we're aiming for, what we'll be doing together, and what they'll be doing on their own. And this is just an example of how the first written composition reflects everything that was done in class that week, but in written form. So they had ample opportunity to practice in class, to practice in blog entries and voice thread recordings, and then have a summative assessment that reflects all of those things. These are some sample PowerPoint slides, which I'm going to run through very quickly. I think that they touch very nicely on the list of different modules that you covered this semester. So this is how my course begins, welcome, illustrations of the different pronouns, different things that we'll use in class. Do you understand? And relevance to the real world. This is a film that students have seen that they enjoy, most of them. And things that they hear in terms of Italian American culture as well, explaining to them that capisce does come from somewhere. The different tools that they're able to use to empower them immediately to use the Italian language, the target language, while they're learning, even if they're not quite sure. So giving them the words no, non capisco in a concrete way. How do you say things in different languages? How do you write them? They have questions, they don't have questions, and then we begin the lesson. So right away they learn, I personalize it. This is me. And I have them personalize the conversation. I also bring in elements of Italian culture immediately. They may not know Marcello and Sofia. They may, depending on their ages. I teach primarily undergraduates, but I also teach veterans and members of the community. So I have lots of different ages. And sometimes some of our students recognize these very famous actors and sometimes they don't, but it's an opportunity to teach them elements of Italian culture from day one. So this is all adapting, getting to know you conversational Italian to themselves and to what we're doing in class. Sorry, I see that there's something happening in the chat. Okay, and that's just a sample of the first lesson. Bringing in little tiny elements of non-target culture, but that works for them so that they understand immediately what's going on. Then they are able to have a getting to know you conversation immediately in Italian. Once they get comfortable with that, I ask them to pretend to be somebody else. And I've tried to sample different people that are famous throughout the world for different reasons. This is what a written blog looks like. Initially, in the beginning of an online semester, it's between the student and I. Then it becomes an open discussion between different students or among different students. The video and voice recordings as well. First, I'm the only person to comment, then other students comment. This is what our site looks like. So you'll see that it has all the relevant information to the course, modules. One of the topics that you discussed this semester was adapting paper materials to the screen, and I had the help of a wonderful colleague in doing that for the online courses. This is a page from an Italian textbook. In order to reflect the same content, the seasons and the months, we used a clip from an Italian film where children talk about their favorite seasons and months, where they're asked to listen and fill in the blanks. and then to move forward and talk about their own favorite seasons and months. And they have been given the language to do that. We used Adobe Connect when we began. We've now moved on to Zoom as we're using tonight, but this is what our classroom looked like. So this is again adapting the page, a textbook page. We no longer use a textbook, but at the time we did. Highlighting, showing things, different listening exercises, written chats, voice chats, pods so that they could work together as they would in a classroom. And this is a clearer example of how all of the C's plus the 6C come together with the different materials that we use, the content that we use in online Italian, and how they slowly go from remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, and evaluating different content to creating their own original content with the language. Unfortunately, I don't have time to show you the projects, but this is a project that was put together by one of the online groups. So a group of students that were spread out all over who were still able to work together on one project where they brought in the content that they used in that semester in order to pretend to be 4 famous Italians at the Donatello Awards, and they were commenting on each other's looks and fashion. So they were able to genuinely use all of the material they had studied that semester in a way that was creative and relevant to them. And this was another group where they were famous people who went to, famous Italians who had gone to Paris together, and this is all the food. Oh, I'm just going to run through it or else you'll have to listen to all of it. But it was beautifully, beautifully put together. And what I found is that the outcomes of using these types of approaches and adapting our materials and adapting ourselves to them, adapting to the online environment, is a stronger sense of community, more confidence, constant motivation, vocabulary building, the frequency of writing and speaking is upped, the quantity is up, the quality therefore goes up. Class time is saved, meaning we don't go through any rote grammatical explanations. We do touch on grammar as needed, but everything is used in context and meaningfully. The content is uncovered in the sense that we're not in a race against a table of contents. We're actually using what we're teaching the students as we're teaching them. And the focus is on the process, not just the product. So in those skits that I would love to have time to show you, as students work on building their skit, building their dialogue, their conversation, their entire project, all of those different parts are either formative or summative assessments. So we go through together on their journey of learning the language. These are some of my sources for some of the types of activities and approaches that I use. And I thank you very much for your time and this opportunity. Again, I look forward to chatting afterwards. Grazie.
Okay, thank you so much, Lillyrose. That was lovely. And we will be speaking with you again for the Q&A. We will move on now to our third presenter for the evening, who is Olga Klimova. And she is a research associate, an online language tutor at the Center for Russian and East European Studies at the University of Pittsburgh. Go ahead.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm so glad that I have a chance to share with you my experience for online and blended language teaching. I'm from the University of Pittsburgh. That's where I got my PhD from in Russian literature and language. And I also have a Master's of Science in Education in Instructional Technology from Duquesne University. And I had an opportunity not only to teach at Pitt, at the University of Pittsburgh and Mercyhurst University, various levels of Russian language, but I also had an opportunity to work as an instructional technology specialist at Hampton School District here in Pittsburgh, and also as a lead instructional designer for one of the online programs at Duquesne University. So what I actually wanted to do with you today, I just wanted to give you some examples of what kind of learning activities I'm using in my classroom. Some of them from my online language experience. Some of them are from the program Star Talk in which I participated this summer and last summer at the University of Iowa. So I developed during this program, and I started using these learning activities in my classroom. How I'm going to present these activities is I picked 4 NFLRC's scenarios that we have already covered in our sessions in the past 4 weeks. And I wanted to address these scenarios by showing some examples of my learning activities. So, and what I'm specifically focusing is on using and introducing more interpersonal and presentational activities in online language courses, developing materials that would be integrating modern technology in a variety of ways, also to take into consideration learners' needs and their interests and backgrounds, and finally find how these learning activities can potentially be used in real-life situations. So what I ask my students to do in my classes is, of course, we don't have enough opportunity to practice our presentational speaking. So I would ask my students to create audio podcasts. Can you see Podomatic site?
Yes, I can see that.
Okay. So as you can see, this is just a sample from one of my classes. My students are creating podcasts, and they record specific topics, specific podcast approximately.
Это Иван Краули. Я решил учиться в университете в Ири.
Okay, so this is just a sample, and the best way, or the best thing what I like about, for example, Podomatic, that underneath of each episode, you can leave your comments. This presentational activity can potentially become an interpersonal activity if you ask students to leave comments and respond to one another comments. So the next one is I ask my students also to keep video blogs or vlogs. And one of the examples is here. Students talking about their dorm room.
У меня в квартире есть красивая кухня.
As you can see, they're talking about different rooms, what they have in their dorm room, what kind of rooms, furniture, etc. So they also had to share it. And again, it is a presentational activity, presentational speaking activity, but it can always transform into interpersonal if you post it on the discussion board. Like I used Blackboard, and students could comment and ask more questions. It's like, oh, what color is your sofa? Or things like this. It's first year Russian, so of course they cannot ask too many questions. So the next one is I ask students to create to play a little bit with language, and that's when I use their own interest, their own background, and ask them to create a project and use real life materials. And this was intermediate Russian, and they took Hollywood movies. I just forwarded.
Русский язык на английский язык для своих фильмов. Но вы ошибаетесь, если вы думаете, что нигде это не было очевидно.
So the idea was to find various Hollywood films. They wanted to, they really didn't like how Tom Cruise, for example, speak Russian in these Hollywood films. So they chose scenes from different Hollywood films where they were using Russian language. And they put together several scenes that with the translation of which, or pronunciation of which they were not happy, and they dubbed it with their own version. So, and that was the idea, and it was one of the projects for intermediate Russian. So, for presentational writing activities, I ask students to create various cartoons, comic books, animations. But today I'll just show you an example that I made for them using Go Animate.
Здравствуйте, меня зовут Клаудия. Я мексиканка. Я учусь в Национальном автономном университете Мексики. Я изучаю политическую науку.
Добрый день. Я Фред.
So So this would be both written presentational and oral presentational mode. But as an instructor, you can alternate it. And because, as you can see, we are posting this on YouTube, we can leave comments at the bottom of these presentations. Also, my students created annotated photo albums, and I asked them specifically using web-based photo sharing tools such as Flickr or Instagram. And I'll just show you just one example. And I allowed them to fake it. So if they didn't really want to share personal pictures, as you can see, they just took some pictures, and then underneath each picture, they had to write a description of this photograph and talk about their family and their friends. So for interpersonal...
I think we lost audio.
Can you hear me now? Hello?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Sorry, that was my mistake.
Great.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, that's fine. Okay. So as for interpersonal mode, I already told you how every learning activity that I designed using web-based tools can be enriched by adding this interpersonal component. And some of them I did have students to comment on like each other's blogs, vlogs, podcasts. But I also asked them to, for example, create interactive maps. And this is one of the examples. I used Foursquare, but you can use any map. So I remember that people talked about Google Map. So Foursquare allows you to create your own map of, let's say I asked them to create a map of Moscow, and they had to write about specific place. So Krasnaya Ploshchad, the Red Square, they were supposed to explain why they choose 5 places on the map of Moscow, 5 places of interest. And we also used it, this was blended activity, so they did this at home, but then in the classroom we showed this these maps on the screen, personal maps on the screen. And because we were learning how to get to, from, directions, etc., I asked students in pairs to direct, like to help each other come, for example, walk from Red Square to, let's say, this is Большой Theater, right? So they were supposed to explain, like, go right, go left, turn left, walk past the cathedral. And this was a great interpersonal activity, which was added to the presentational learning activity. And finally, I use for actual discussions, audio discussions, I use VoiceThread, and probably some of you are already familiar with this. This is just one small example. So when students were supposed to talk about Thanksgiving.
Привет, Natalia и Becky. Я Павел. На день благодарения я буду ходим.
So you get an idea. They had to pick roles on the screen, and then they had to choose what they like to eat during Thanksgiving, and then to respond to each other, because there were several students attached to each slide, and there was a few groups, and they were supposed to talk and comment. Oh, Natalia, you like turkey, but I don't like turkey. I like peach pie, for example. And then they could come back and respond to each other, to each other's comments. And finally, something that I developed, and one of them I was able to, I had an opportunity to use. The other one I didn't have a chance to use. It was, I developed it during this startup program for teachers, and Nearpod, and I think that some maybe secondary school teachers may be familiar with Nearpod, because it is usually used with iPads. And this is just an example how you can make an interpretive activity more fun. So this is just a text about the Russian traditional costume. right, with some vocabulary and some images, but it has some activities. As you can see, there is a fill in the blanks activity. There is also a drawing activity where students have to choose the incorrect detail of the costume and cross it over, right? So, and why Nearpod can be useful, because it can work, it can be worked in the asynchronous mode. So you don't have, there is an option where not the teacher control the screen, but it can be assigned to all the students at home, and they can complete it at home. And a similar thing that you can assign to your students at home, but that also can be used in the classroom, it's on Play Pause It, or it used to be, oh, I was having some problems here, so I'll just show it here. It is the it's so-called EduCanon or Play Pause It. It's a video that can integrate questions. So these are the questions, as students will have to answer the questions, submit them, and receive that, oh, this is incorrect answer, for example. So, and these are some of the activities that I was using in my classroom. And I just wanted, again, to remind you, please, when you use technology, make sure that you use it wisely. Technology can help, especially as you can see, you can use it for different interpersonal learning activities. You can enrich presentational learning activities by including interpersonal mode. You can create something that students might use in real life, like, for example, creating maps on these social websites, right, where they've been, where they went, or what they visited, or creating, for example, vlogs talking about their life in Russia. This is something that they can potentially do, or will, or used to do in their real life. So this something like that can be used, and we just need to be smart and careful, and not to overdo this. And if you have any questions, I have here my email, and I also have my portfolio as an instructional technology specialist. It's KlimovaMagnota.portfolio.com, and you might find some more ideas there and some examples from my teaching. Okay, thank you, and that's all.
Wow.
That was fast.
Wow, that was just a whirlwind, 45 minutes of the most tools in use I've ever seen. That was amazing. So I think we are going to bring all three presenters in together right now. Stephen, is that correct? Are we going to have them each share? Okay, I see Emily.
Yes, please. If all three panelists could send video and we can discuss.
Okay, I don't know if Olga's camera is working. Maybe she can try again and see if she can get her camera in there as well. And if Lillyrose could share her video. And here she comes. Lillyrose says her video is stopped. Oh, wait.
Okay, here I am.
There she is. Okay. So I see Emily and Lillyrose. Olga, how are you doing?
No, it doesn't allow me to use.
Oh, I see. Hold on. Your name's popping up sometimes. That happens right before the camera comes on.
Olga doesn't have a functional camera that's visible to Zoom, so I think we just have to move ahead.
Okay.
Oh, that's strange, because we just used it yesterday and it was functional.
Okay. Well, then we will be able to see Lillyrose and Emily, and we will be able to hear Olga. So many wonderful examples of a lot of the theory we've discussed throughout the webinars that we've had in this course, and seeing them all in action is really exciting and inspiring, at least for me. And yeah, we would love to be able to, I think everybody's mentioning they'd love to be able to see the PowerPoints, if you guys would be willing to share those after today's presentation so that we could put those on our website. I think people would love to be able to go through those a little bit more slowly and take a look at things. So let's get started with some Q&A. If our participants have some questions, you can feel free to type them into the chat. Or if you would like to activate your microphone and introduce yourself and ask a question, we can do it that way. Again, we just ask that you are respectful of everybody and sort of, as we said before, treat it like a walkie-talkie. Let us know when you're done speaking so that we can move on to the next person. So let's see if we have any questions coming in from participants. I know one question that I saw in the text chat, Olga, during your presentation, somebody was wondering how the students were able to edit those YouTube videos to do their own dubbing. Do you have any quick technical tips on that, about how they did that?
No, YouTube, we just use YouTube as more like a video sharing platform. So they used, this specific group, I think, used iMovie. Yeah, and Go Animate, other tools like web-based tools like Go Animate, they allow you also to add various call-outs and clips and stuff like this.
Okay. Shannon has a question. What are some good tips to deal with the inevitable, quote, "it didn't work for me" excuse that we get from some students? That sounds very familiar to me. I'm usually around a 90% successful completion rate when I have students use online tools, and inevitably with every tool there are students who can't get it to work. Emily, I see you nodding your head. Do you want to answer that?
I am dealing with this right now. I work in Blackboard and Blackboard Collaborate, and a lot of Blackboard's tools that use Java just went down. And so I had a lot of audio things, exercises that I typically have students do that all of a sudden did not work. And my workaround has been to drop a lot of the audio, but I try and find backup and then another backup and then another backup and then an analog option.
Okay.
That would be my answer to that question. Most of my students live in very small towns with limited bandwidth. So it not working is a genuine possibility.
Do you find that it's a major problem for you? I mean, do you spend a lot of time dealing with that?
More than I'd like to. I mean, initially everything I sort of set up with things that worked. And so the initial things that I did back in 2011 and 2012 were based on what was functional at that time. And so then I went, oh, and I developed those. And then come 2013 and the latest update that happened over the summer, stuff happens all the time. And so right now I've been thinking a lot. I was actually tempted to talk more about that, of coming up with analog options, but that sounded rather going backwards. I would like to come up with technical options that can have an analog mirror so that students who are more, comfortable or who don't have computers at home have a backup option they can do in a lot of the assignments, or another workaround that they can do.
Okay. Ellen Hart, you said you had a question. Do you want to turn your microphone on and ask?
Sure. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
I can.
Great. I work with the North Carolina Virtual Public School, and one of the challenges that we seem to always face is having it so that the teachers and students can have that synchronous experience online. And I'm just curious as to how you might deal with that dilemma and have that in your courses, synchronous versus asynchronous. What's the balance that you might have?
I like Blackboard Collaborate. It gives a very good synchronous experience. You can layer images upon images. You can have students you can put pictures over clip art and have students take on different roles within a dialogue. The chat box is really active. The breakout rooms work great. It just depends on Java, and it's expensive. But with my students, I meet 3 times a week. So.
Well, and we had the same problem with Blackboard Collaborate, and we currently are using Blackboard Collaborate Ultra. And we, I see you cringing. So we're actually looking for possible new tools because we just moved all of our materials over to Canvas, away from Blackboard, away from Moodle. And that's been one of the challenges that we face, is dealing with that synchronous piece that we just feel is so important. And one of the challenges that we had was that so many times our teachers and our students couldn't be online at the same time. And so I guess that's one of my questions too, in terms of, do any of you do team teaching type approach? Because that's something that I know that we had to turn to where every teacher offers an hour long on the particular lessons, and the students can pick and choose which ones that they go to so that they can have that synchronous experience. It might not be with their teacher, it might be with another teacher. I'm just curious if any of you have dealt with that and maybe come up with new ideas.
I do have a suggestion for if all students can't make the same session. If you're able to record a session, there is a website called Vialogs that allows you to upload video. You can actually upload it to YouTube and then kind of link it into Vialogs, or just upload it directly to Vialogs. And it allows students to leave comments and questions that are time-stamped. So it creates watching the recording and makes it a very interactive experience. You can also upload them. I think there's a TechSmith product that requires it to stop it every once in a while for students to respond to questions.
Could you spell that website
Yeah,
for
I'll put
us,
that in
or type it into the chat?
the website, you have to set up an account in a different thing. Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
And you have to set up an account in a different kind of ed tech something or other. And then that gives you access. The inconvenient thing is that you have to give students individual access. It's kind of hard to give kind of a group link. They have to have accounts as well, and then you have to kind of invite them in for security, but it works really nice. Or you can make it public. But.
Ah, we see Olga. Hello.
I had to use my phone, so now I'm using my phone for the video and my audio.
All right, our next question is, how do you get students who are only working online to complete group projects? Lillyrose, do you have some experience with that?
Yes, I do. The projects that I would love to be able to show you someday were completed by students that were in different places in the United States as well as abroad. So students who were doing their work in the summertime. We had a student in China, a student in California, a student in Florida. So they were in different time zones and physically were unable to be together. But one thing that I failed to actually use the term project-based learning, the courses that I teach are very project-based. So not only do they have one big culminating project at the end, but each little piece, as I did mention, is an assessment in and of itself. So a lot of what the students do are individual responses to a particular problem, to a particular prompt, and those they can do on their own, but little by little I layer them so that they kind of funnel into either pair or small group or big group projects. The biggest projects that I've had are 15 students working on one big project and doing a beautiful job throughout the entire semester. And that's part of the differentiated approach where I have them also negotiate. That was an advanced Italian 1 class. So they had more language and were able to actually negotiate in Italian who was going to do what, why, how, did they want to make a video, a skit, write a song, etc. It would make more sense in the context of a presentation that specifies what we do in the course. But all of these projects are multi-layered, and since each individual part often is attached to the individual student, and then becomes slowly but surely a group project, it makes it easier to digest each piece and makes it possible for students to work together on projects. I actually don't require that they be group projects. It always turns out that students want to do that. I think because of the community that gets built either in the online class or in the face-to-face class or the blended class. So it's worked out really great that way. But it is very possible to do. It takes obviously a lot of guidance. We talk about the teacher as the facilitator now. So the different steps really need to be mapped out for them to follow, and the flexibility and the adaptability to what they're interested in and what they would like to do with all of this material has to be there as well on the part of the teacher. No, not 15 students from different time zones. No, that was that would be fascinating. That was that was actually one group of 12, one group of 15 in different semesters. That was a very, very high-tech advanced Italian 1 face-to-face project. But a lot of it was done out of class time because of the amount of work that it involved. But everything was separated nicely. So students who didn't want to be on camera did the editing, and students who didn't want to do the editing chose the background music, or they all found their place, and they all worked comfortably together without being pushed into doing anything in particular.
Okay, thank you. Olga, did you want to say something?
Yes, I think I just wanted to add to what Lillyrose has already told you. What I was doing in order to keep an eye on all these group projects, I was creating specific discussion boards within our LMS. We were using Blackboard, and each discussion board was for a specific group. And I told them they had to communicate with one another in this discussion board so I would see it. And I would told them that I'm going to be their spy, and I would be spying on them, how they're sharing, what they're sharing, who is there. If they have any technical problems, they're posting there so I can go and respond and help. And that's how it actually worked out well. And all the group projects I try to facilitate through these discussion boards.
Great. Earlier we had a question, I'll throw this out for anyone who would like to address it, about teaching writing online. How do you handle writing assignments in your fully online courses? Or teaching writing, especially to beginning language learners? How do you think you approach, I know a lot of these tech tools are oriented towards speaking, so what sort of writing activities do you do, and what sort of tools, online tools, do you use to facilitate that?
Is this a question about forming letters like pen and paper, or is this a question about typing, or is this a question about structuring a sentence?
Yeah, I believe written language, creating written language.
In terms of forming letters, that's a separate discussion in Russian, and
correct.
That's a lot of fun.
Right.
I can speak more to that in terms of formulating like essays. My students are too beginning to really get too in depth in that.
Mm-hmm. Lillyrose, how about you? Oh, your microphone's turned off. Oh, there you go.
We used to use Blackboard, and now we use Canvas. And I try to limit the different places that the students have to go to get their projects done. So I stick to Canvas now. And we used to use Adobe Connect, and now we use Zoom for the synchronous parts of the online or the blended courses. But I use the written discussions as weekly blogs, for example, or nightly homework. It depends on which level, it depends on which course, which students, but they write very regularly. They actually write a lot more often than they used to before. I relied heavily on the technology as a help. So they'll have homework that somehow reflects what they did in class. They'll have very specific prompts. They'll be urged to use new vocabulary meaningfully. I guess the biggest push that I have for them, especially in the beginning, is vocabulary. One of my second language development teachers told me when I asked, I thought I would learn the big key. How do you learn vocabulary? How do you teach vocabulary? And she responded that vocabulary is a lifelong endeavor, and it indeed is. So what I ask them to keep in mind is, what is it that you really want to be able to say about yourself and the people closest to you? If the word engineering is an important word for you, then learn it and make sure you can use it. If it isn't, try to find other words that make more sense. And I'm talking about more beginning level students. So there will be prompts that focus on them getting to know themselves in the new language and introducing themselves to each other. But Olga, I really liked what you said. You don't push them to share their personal lives unless they want to. I also keep it very open. You can be anybody you want to be. If we're talking about family and you want to talk about your family, that's great. If you'd rather not, that's great. And I'm not going to fact check. So, and people can choose to be whoever they want in Italian. But all of these things are done online. So they slowly build in the discussions or on the pages. So if I want more collaborative work, that's kind of like a Google Doc. And the video and voice recordings usually reflect what they've written. So I ask them to write about something and record a kind of a natural, sort of rehearse, but kind of a natural response to a prompt. And then we talk about it in class. So the different levels of presentation are there. They're a little bit prepared for it, but it's spontaneous as well. Then they talk about it in groups or in pairs. So the different modes of communication are all attached together. But it really depends on the level as to how much they write and how often, etc.
Okay, Olga and Emily, it does look like we have some interest in how you address actually forming the letters and non-Roman scripts. Do you want to address that quickly?
Can I share a screen real quick?
Sure.
So I have PDF assignments that I give students, and they download it from the LMS, and then they get to fill them out with the pen and paper. So they get a chance to, this is just matching up the spelling of a name and being able to create it using Russian script, which is complicated, particularly for high school students these days and age, because they don't do cursive in English really anymore. But identifying it and being able to form the letters is important, I think. When we practice this in class, I would share a whiteboard and then have them use scrolling tools. So just use their trackpad. And it's fun because it's the one time when they can do better than I can. My trackpad skills are not that great, and I get some fairly artistic students who are really have good hand-eye coordination and can recreate letters on screen. I would maybe put up an image of the thing and then have them use their mouse to trace it. If you have live classes, I think you can do that in Zoom as well as in Blackboard Collaborate.
Okay, Olga?
I need to unmute myself. I actually had also to use just PDFs, and then they would scan and submit it through Blackboard. But on several occasions, we used whiteboards, interactive whiteboards, which are already on the websites, various ones, where you can actually draw. And of course, we wouldn't be able to do any activities, specific activities, extensive activities. But for example, I will split them. I will play a game if there are like, let's say like 5 students. And I would say, okay, the first one who will write the word mama in Russian cursive is going to get like 5 extra points today. And on the white screen, like whiteboard, like we all can see how they're writing. So this is a fun thing, but it's also like they're trying to use website and the web resources to practice their handwriting. But this is just something that I used in the past.
Okay. Could you each give us an idea of how many hours of synchronous teaching you would typically have per week in each of your courses? Emily, can we start with you?
I teach on average 3, although this year I'm having to run an unusual schedule because I have 2 different classes that meet about 20 minutes off at the same time period. So I do 3 hours with one week and 2 hours. So I do Monday, Wednesday, Friday with one group. And it's like 1 class hour, which is really about 40, 50 minutes, 50 if we're lucky. And then I'll do Tuesday, Thursday with them the next week. But typically it would be Monday, Wednesday, Friday each week.
Okay, Lillyrose?
So it depends on the course. The Italian beginning 1 and 2, which are summer courses that are meant to replace the semester courses, are accelerated. So 1 semester, which would normally be about 4 months of Italian, is crammed into 5.5 weeks in the summertime. So they are online. What we set aside when they register is 2.5 hours, 4 nights a week. That's a lot. We tend to try to keep it to 2 or below, but that 2.5 hours ensures that they can be online for their oral interviews, to be able to discuss with the teacher, etc. Especially for the students who are working, who are abroad. We like to have the window be more open. The Sicilian course and the Italian survival kit course are half-credit courses, so I meet with them twice a week for 50 minutes each, so just shy of 2 hours per week. And then the blended courses, it really depends. The meeting online will take the place of 1 class meeting, 1 face-to-face meeting, for example. But it's a struggle that we have. for many other subjects, the amount of synchronous work obviously doesn't have to be so high or doesn't have to mirror exactly what you would do in a face-to-face classroom, but we're struggling with finding the balance of offering that meaningful face-to-face exchange online with the flexibility that being online offers. And Emily, you had talked about the class recordings being fundamentally important, and we are working to try to take more advantage of that so that students who have to work, who can't, that's a big time commitment, 2.5 hours a night, 4 nights a week for 5.5 weeks when students are working or doing other things is difficult. So we're actually working to find a balance of how do we keep the integrity of the content and what we deliver, but really take advantage of the flexibility of an online course. So I'm sorry, that's a question that you asked me a question. I'm ending with a question, but I think it's a struggle that a lot of us have. How do we find that perfect balance, that perfect fit?
Yeah, for sure. Olga, what's your experience with this?
And it is difficult in general because a lot of things depend on the administration. So, for example, Pete tries to avoid as much synchronous elements as possible. I try to keep almost everything asynchronous, have like one meeting a week, for example, like this, or like right now I'm doing online tutoring for the Center for Russian and Eastern European Studies. So I'm doing a one-on-one with different students. And if for the administration, of course, they would have used just like no synchronous component at all. But I've been using GoToMeeting. We used to have Blackboard, I think, Collaborate, but I think they got rid of it. So now it's just GoToMeeting. And if I need, like, I don't feel like once a week is enough. So sometimes I would just schedule with students some like additional hours if they have questions about group projects, if they have any like any other issues or problems, or if we need to do a preparation for an exam or something like this. So my like additional office hours online. So, and then I'll make them synchronous.
Okay, I think we can squeeze in one more question. I'm pretty sure I can do my portion in 45 minutes. So the last question, which I think is an excellent one, is would you say that online students learn as much as students who take a language in a face-to-face class? The $64,000 question. You all probably have experience in the past teaching face-to-face, I'm assuming. Yes, nodding. You've taught in the face-to-face classroom before. And now you're teaching online. How would you compare the amount of content you can cover and the proficiency levels that you feel like or measure your students getting to compared to teaching in just the face-to-face classroom? Emily, we'll come back to you maybe.
So I actually, the online was my first diving into high school Russian. So I can only compare my high school students to college level students. That's what I did my face-to-face in before. And they definitely learn less, and I cannot say whether that's whether that's a factor of high school versus college. If there were less time spent dealing with microphone issues during my live sessions, that would cut out a little bit less of that problem and a little bit more into the teaching. I would say that there's certain things that online synchronous sessions offer that face-to-face do not. So there are things that I can do in terms of covering verb conjugation and explaining, like I can use clip art to put students' faces over it and put them into situations where miming that in a real class, a face-to-face class, would be really difficult. I can show students a blown-up version of a ruble that I would need an overhead projector in a brick and mortar, but we can look and point to all of the things and interact with that same piece of realia. At the same time, I can send them on scavenger hunts around the internet, finding pictures of things and bringing them back and finding me information. It's got its good sides and it's got its bad sides. If we didn't have to deal with headsets and microphones malfunctioning, we'd get a lot more done.
Okay, Lillyrose?
We have, I think, a really particular situation here where our goal, Italian is pretty small, and it was hard sometimes to get actually enough students in the summertime in a face-to-face classroom, and that was the challenge that we posed to ourselves when I proposed putting Italian online. We started with the summer to see if we could fill in this gap. And we really, really wanted to absolutely mirror what the students would have been doing in the face-to-face classroom. So I taught Italian face-to-face for 3 summers in a row and then taught Italian face-to-face, online for 3 summers in a row. So I really have a genuine look at what it was like face-to-face versus what it's like online. And we've had students complete the language requirement by starting online 110 Italian 1 and Italian 2, and then moving on to the face-to-face classroom for intermediate 1 and 2, and doing so successfully. So I have absolute evidence that they do learn as well as they do in the classroom. I would dare say even more in our particular situation. But like I said, we do 2.5 hours a night, 2 to 2.5 hours a night, 4 nights a week for 5.5 weeks. So we have worked very, very hard to absolutely replicate what they would be doing face-to-face. Once we try to strike this balance with the flexibility that online can offer, we're hoping that we don't lose any of the quality of course. That's the big question. But as of right now, I have to say that the students do an amazing job, even in the half credit course, which is just 2 hours a week. I'm very impressed with what they're able to learn and do with the language at the end of learning online. And I think it depends on the particular student. Students who are willing to work hard are willing to work hard, whether they're online or in the face-to-face classroom, and that has a lot to do with it.
Okay, thank you. Olga, what's your take
Yes,
on
I agree that a lot of things depends on the students, how motivated they are, like what they exactly want to gain in this class. But I think there are a lot of things also that the instructors control, right? And some instructors, and I had this experience in the past, that some instructors just took face-to-face pedagogy and moved it, like very blindly moved it to their online classes, and this wasn't effective, right? And I saw the cases that, of course, students would lose interest. They would drop the courses. They would be complaining that they're not learning the language as much as in the regular class. However, that's why I guess that's what we are all doing in this seminar, because you, like, as an instructor, you're trying to learn all these different secrets of online teaching. And if you set it up correctly, if you do this online language teaching the way how it would meet all the students' needs and would be the most effective way. I saw students online who would learn even more than the students who would learn in face-to-face for different reasons.
Okay, well, I think that's about all the time we have for our Q&A today. I thank all 3 of you so much for all of your contributions. It was a wonderful experience to see all of the real-life ways that you're applying the tools that we've talked about in this webinar. It's very inspiring. And I, for one, want to go back to the drawing board and start implementing as many of the ideas that I've seen this evening as I can. Thank you so much. I know we have lots of thank yous coming through on the chat. So we appreciate you taking time out of your, let's see, day, evening, night that you did for all of us today. And we appreciate that very much. So feel free to stick around if you'd like. I'm going to wrap up what we've done so far, or if you have other things to attend to, we will see you later. So thank you all very much.